Hi, my name's Pat. I live at Pat Nelson. I live at 86 Cayuga Street. I have 3 points. One, as I read this over, I think it's clear I support this. The first thing is, as an engineer, I don't think with the fracking, I think this is wise because I don't think they have control over what they're doing at this process yet. As a healthcare provider, which I am also, I am deeply concerned as with the unknown health effects, especially neurologic damage due to the chemicals, most of which are unknown at this time. I think the risk is too great. And I guess thirdly, as a taxpayer, I don't want to pay for the road maintenance for these trucks and the equipment that are going over the roads. If you looked at some of the paving that was done last year, the macadam is breaking down already. And I could see some, heavy equipment, and I just don't want to support it. I don't want to pay the taxes for it, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I'm Ken Zesserson. I'm the Planning Board Chairman in Ulysses, but more to the point, I'm the Chairman of the Ulysses Gas Drilling Advisory Board, UGDAB. This group was sanctioned by the Town Board 18 months ago to help educate the Board and ourselves certainly, about hydrofracking, and also to stage educational programs for the public so we can understand this monster at the gates. I just want to briefly take the opportunity to recognize the efforts of EGDAB and some others who wouldn't be, without whom we wouldn't be here tonight in this room. I'm sure there are many other people whose names I don't know who should be recognized, but these are the ones I do know. The UGDAB people and others like them spent thousands of unpaid hours going door to door, getting petitions, providing public education either individually or in group efforts. And their names should be in this record because it wouldn't exist if it weren't for them. So I'd like to recognize, if I could, Michelle Bamberger and Robert Oswald, Jane Penrose, Ann Furman, Jan Quarles, Michael Deneen, and last but hardly least, Judy Abrams. Judy was one of the co-founders of another citizens group, Concerned Citizens of Ulysses, and that was more than 3 years ago. She was one of the first people who raised her hand in this town and said, what's about to happen here? But the UGDAB group and Concerned Citizens didn't do it alone. We were also joined by our grassroots group, Back to Democracy, which did a lot of door-to-door and a lot of walking and a lot of talking on behalf of this effort tonight. And finally, we certainly wouldn't be here if it weren't for Helen and David Slotchie, the Community Environmental Defense Council lawyers who have given this town and this county thousands of hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars of pro bono legal consultation. They're the ones who developed the concept on which I think this law basically, from which it grew, and that is that while we are presumably not allowed to regulate gas drilling, we can ban it. And that is what this town board is going to be doing, it sounds to me, on August 10th. So we'd like to really thank the Slotchies for just helping us all start this thing. And of course, the people who have to be thanked, the ones up here, are the ones who bore the brunt of all the pestering and all the all the angst that we tried to cause. And that's, of course, the town board, Roxanne and Mariette. And I think we all owe them a great vote of thanks for acting in such a responsible and brave fashion. And thank you very much.
My name is Paul Bartoshevich. I live on 7615 Willow Creek Road. I laud you for your efforts. I thank you for your efforts. I run a marketing and media firm in Ithaca called Finger Lakes Productions, and I've been aware of the American Petroleum Institute for a long time. They are what we're up against. API represents about 400 corporations, including all of the big oil companies, Chevron, BP, ConocoPhillips, etc. They have a $90 million annual budget. They spent $3.6 million to lobby our government officials in 2009. They are the people behind the ads you see on television that say, they begin with, the deeper you go, the more good things you learn about oil and gas, and they end with, so the next time we discover more oil and gas together underground, think of all the good things that it means above ground. They have a huge ad budget, and they have a huge lobbying budget, and we need to be in touch with not only our local officials, but our elected officials in Washington and in New York as well. Just a little bit more about API. A few years ago, the federal government, the Congress, enacted a climate bill. After the House narrowly voted it in, API became active and began holding rallies around the country. Many of the people attending the demonstrations were employees of oil companies who work for the oil companies. I have a New York Times article that I'll leave in the back. I'd like to end with this. There's a tragic analogy to be made here. I was a news anchor in Syracuse, New York during the 1980s, and I listened to the elected officials there argue for the industry to be on the banks of Onondaga Lake. Onondaga Lake is a terrible mess now, and in the 1980s and before then, it was argued that the jobs were at issue. There are jobs here. Well, in 1985, the companies went bankrupt that were on that lake. They're gone. The lake is dead. It's dead. It's one of the most polluted lakes in the world, and those jobs are gone. And so I hope these oil companies stay out of here and continue to deal with the good people that are before me. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gwen Wilkinson. I'm a resident of Ulysses. I live on Hinging Post Road, and I'm also the Tompkins County District Attorney. First, as a resident of Ulysses, I support the ordinance. I think there are many people here tonight that can speak at least as well as I could, and probably better, about the horrific forecast for infrastructure, environment, and public safety, public health, as if we don't take steps to ban hydrofracking. But there are other ripple effects, too, that are maybe not so much in the public eye, and I want to take just a minute to talk about the area that occupies most of my time, which is public safety. We've had some reports to the Public Safety Committee, subcommittee of the Tompkins County Legislature. We've had people come and report on the public safety issues that have arisen in areas that did not act in time to stop hydrofracking. And some of these, and this is probably an incomplete list, include terrible delays in emergency responder time for fire, for police emergency. The 911 calls in, I believe, Bradford County, but don't quote me on the county, but the number is right. 911 calls went up by 4,000 in 1 year after hydrofracking and drilling started in the area. The level of assaults have spiked dramatically in Bradford County. Property crimes are up. Sexual assaults are up. These are all spin-offs of a big influx of people who come into town for a finite period of time, who are not invested in the community, who have a lot of money in their pockets on Friday and Saturday night. I would encourage you, if you're curious, to talk to any of the restaurant or tavern owners in Bradford County who have all had horrible difficulties with their business, with property damage, with loss of revenue. I think we all know that hydrofracking poses a terrible risk to our community on many levels. And I just wanted to shine a little light on one that hasn't been getting so much attention, but which I strongly believe will be impacted terribly if hydrofracking goes on. I'll be supporting this ordinance, and I thank you all for your efforts.
My name is Jerry Kyle. I live on Rabbit Run Road in the town of Ulysses. I support the proposal. I have a slightly different way to approach it. I know that we all know the facts, and so I kind of look to the past to see how other people have thought about this. And I found this Cree Indian prophecy that says, when all the trees have been cut down, when all the animals have been hunted, when all the waters are polluted, when all the air is unsafe to breathe, only then will you discover you cannot eat money. And what I took from that is when all the oil has been extracted, when all the gas has been released, when all the waters are contaminated, when all the air carries poisons to our lungs, Will we know only then that we could have found alternatives? And this is another ancient Indian proverb. Treat the earth well. It was not given to you by your parents. It was loaned to you by your children. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. And so what I get from that is, walk lightly on the ground beneath your feet. It took the ancestors of all the plants and animals around us millions of years to create the gas down below. What's the rush? Shouldn't we save some for our children and their children and their children's children? And from Uncle Ralph Nader, the use of solar energy has not been opened up because the oil industry does not own the sun. And from me, banning gas drilling is only one step in the process of saving our precious homes and landscape. It's time to pull the rug out from underneath the gas companies by working towards sustainability, to conserve our use of natural resources, to pursue alternative energy sources, and to set an example. And from Mark Twain, a round man cannot be expected to fit in a square hole right away. He must have time to modify his shape. And I say, let's get started. The clock is ticking.
Hello, my name is Nedra Harvey. I don't live here, but I have property at 4542 Iredell Road, and I now live in Rochester. And I'm in full support of this, and I came here tonight to just say it out loud, you know. I don't know if you know it, but Rochester does know about this. We're trying to wake them up, and there are a great many people that are paying attention to this. I thank you all for the emails that I get every day telling me what's going on down here. Sometimes it feels like Rochester and Western New York are sort of disconnected from the middle of the state, but we are there. I'm not a scientist, a lawyer, or anything. I'm a retired teacher, and I just think that part of the problem, there's so many people who don't know this or who won't take up a fight. I don't know, are we complacent? Are we cynical? Are we hopeless? I don't know what we are, but I think that this is banning this across the many towns that are already taking this up is just a wonderful way to fight it. And I wish you luck and thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Michelle Bamberger, and I live at 1225 Hinging Post Road in the town of Ulysses. So I would like to thank the Ulysses Town Board for studying the impacts that gas drilling has on communities in Pennsylvania and elsewhere, and might possibly have on our town, and for their efforts these past months in drawing up this draft zoning legislation. I would like to make a few comments about the work that Robert Oswald and I have been doing for the past 7 months. We are documenting the health of animals and their owners living on or adjacent to properties with gas drilling operations in several states around the country. As we continue to collect information, I find that I am surprised by some findings, and I would like to share that with you tonight. First, we found that approximately 1/3 of all of our cases were associated with the drilling of shallow or deep vertical gas wells. I would like to commend the town board for studying this issue and including vertical gas drilling under this zoning legislation. Secondly, we found that severe health effects were not only associated with water contamination, but also with acute and chronic exposure to contaminated air. We have documented several cases where the property owner's health has declined to such a degree that their doctors have advised them to leave their homes and live elsewhere for the sake of their health and that of their children. These cases also involve water contamination, and in both cases, the families must use water buffaloes for all of their non-drinking water needs and water dispensers for drinking water needs. When the families continued to be ill after they stopped all usage of their water, further medical tests were done, and both phenol, which is a metabolite of benzene, and hippuric acid, which is a metabolite of toluene, were found at high levels in their bodies. Their symptoms consist of difficulty breathing, severe lethargy, dry hacking coughs with sore burning throats, intense headaches and nosebleeds, and a diminished sense of smell and hearing. They do not know if they will ever be able to live in their homes again with their animals without being sick. I would like to conclude by strongly encouraging the town board to pass this legislation as soon as possible. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Paul Rice. I live on Crumbs Corners Road. I have two main concerns about the introduction of hydrofracking into our community, in addition to all the ones that have already been raised. One has to do with the loss of value to property that would almost certainly occur if hydrofracking were permitted. Such loss would result not just from pollution of our water supply, but also from the general degradation of the environment due to heavy truck traffic, with consequent damage to roads, constant industrial noise, noxious odors and toxic fumes, and something that is very important in our beautiful area, which attracts so many tourists, the destruction of nature and of our landscape. My question is, who would compensate us for such loss? Who would pay for the water wells that are contaminated by methane and dangerous chemicals? And who would compensate us for the loss of property value? So when we find that we are unable to sell our homes because potential buyers will flee from the site of nearby drilling rigs, who is going to make up the loss to us? Anyone? Not only that, but we now learn that banks may not give mortgages on properties near gas wells. So who will give us compensation? The gas companies? I would not expect to get even partial and inadequate compensation very easily. Will the state cover our losses? The federal government? I think it very doubtful. That leaves the town of Ulysses, that is us. Will we cover the losses to our neighbors who suffer from this? So I would really like to know who would pay for such losses. And I hope and I believe that the town board is going to think very carefully about this question before they even think of allowing hydrofracking to go forward. A second point I just want to say is that if we allow hydrofracking to come into our area, there will be no turning back, no way to reverse the clock and undo the consequent damage. So if we adopt this present resolution and later decide that it was a mistake, well, we can always go back and repeal it. But we cannot undo a ruined water supply and a destroyed environment. So please let us pass this resolution and not allow our beautiful area to be destroyed. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eric Slocum. I live on the Jacksonville Road, 7187 the Jacksonville Road. I'm a fourth-generation citizen of Tompkins County. I grew up in Slaterville. I lived in some various places around the nation and elected to come back here because of the natural beauty that we have here. I'm a conservative. I'm pro-business. I'm an outdoorsman. I like to hunt. And I have traveled for the last 22 years when my mom retired from Cornell down to Northern Virginia through Pennsylvania down Route 13, 14, and 15. And I'll tell you candidly, I've seen that area change dramatically and not for the better. I can't speak as eloquently as some of my neighbors about the externalities, but I'll touch on just a few. And I also been lucky enough to do a few hunts out in Wyoming where it's a beautiful state. In fact, there's more antelope in Wyoming than there are people. And it's beautiful out there. But at certain times, the air quality out there around these fracking wells is worse than L.A. And I've lived in L.A., and that's bad. With respect to some of these chemicals that some of the others have talked to, I can't even say some of those names. But you remember those Cheerios commercials? Cheerios has 12 essential vitamins and minerals, right? It's because it's good for you. With the Cheney exemption, where they don't tell you what's in the ground, Why don't they tell you what's in there? Because it's bad for you. We all know that. So, and with respect to what Gwen was saying, I've seen the Roughnecks down there. I don't want to speak to anything about how somebody makes a living because, you know, well, I work for Ithaca Gun. My dad worked for Ithaca Gun. There's not a lot of business here. Basically, what distills down to is we have Cornell and we have our water. I've seen the wine trails grow. If we poison the well now, we'll have nothing. And believe me, the downstate people that from Long Island, Suffolk County, and those affluent areas will not send their kids to Cornell if the well is poisoned. You know, Cornell can insulate itself a little bit. They own, what, 45% of the county? But it's not enough. Once that fracking water seeps in, you'll permanently poison the well. And we just can't afford the opportunity cost of the unknowns of letting these fracking companies in. They don't deal squarely. They're just going to be tough on the roads. We had an engineer here, Pat, could tell you about the coefficient of restitution about those tires on those bridges, but I'll tell you, I've seen it in Pennsylvania. The roads are torn up. The Roughnecks enjoy a festive atmosphere when they go out. I think Gwen spoke to that. So I just want to ask the legislature to please not enact, to not allow the fracking to continue and pass this resolution. Thank you.
I'm Mitch Clark, and I run the Halsey House Bed and Breakfast on Trumansburg Road, 2057 Trumansburg Road. And another industry for the area is tourism, and it's huge. It would devastate the tourism industry because once we ran out of the people coming to see the devastation, then nobody's going to come. I have the Ithaca Journal's Monday, January 27th issue, where the headline was Gusher Highlights Shale Potential. And just one line in there is that the landowners holding the gas leases, there are fewer than 25 of them in this area that has been devastated, are splitting hundreds of thousands of dollars in monthly royalties. Well, aren't they the lucky ones? You know, they can move out and get water elsewhere. The other people are stuck with lost profit on their homes. Their life has been totally turned upside down and devastated. If we haven't learned from all these articles coming out of here, from the devastation going on below us, I don't know what more they could tell us. You know, if we lose this battle, we've lost the through truck battle on Route 96, which has really kind of put a damper on the industry. But if we lose this battle, we're done. And I think another part in this article where it says one of the gas industry leaders says that it's like batting practice. The more you swing the bat, the better you get. Let them swing the bat somewhere else. You know, it's not a place for practice. You know, if they come in here, tear up our roads, tear up our ground, ruin our water, totally pollute our area 24/7, it's not going to be a place worth living. I moved here because it was a destination, and this is not going to be a destination. Thanks.
I'm Bob Howarth. I live at 4124 Reynolds Road. I'd like to thank the board, the supervisor, and our town attorney for the very careful and cautious, thorough work they've done on this. I fully support the proposed change in the zoning ordinance. By way of background, I'm an environmental scientist. I earned a PhD back in the 70s from MIT. I've been a tenured faculty member at Cornell since 1985. I'm an expert on environmental risk assessment. I've worked extensively on the environmental consequences of oil and gas development since the 1970s. I've testified in federal court. I've testified before the U.S. Congress on some of these issues for decades. The precautionary principle here says we should go very slow on this process everywhere, and we should do everything we can, certainly, to keep it out of our town. The development of natural gas from shale is a recent phenomenon. The technology was not available 10 or 15 years ago to do it. The scientific evidence on what the consequences are is only now coming into sharp focus, and it does not look good. It was a very thorough paper by Duke University scientists, which came out last month in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. It shows that if you live in the Marcellus Shale in Pennsylvania and you have gas drilling within 1 kilometer, 2/3 of a mile of your home, you have a very, very high probability that your well will be contaminated with methane, quite possibly to explosive levels, and with that, you're likely to have toxic radon and benzene coming into your home. So the water pollution is a severe issue. The air pollution was mentioned earlier. I think that's a very real issue. The air quality monitoring at the state of Texas is done in the Barnett Shale, shows extremely high levels of benzene at times, many other hydrocarbons at levels which are acutely toxic in Texas. Now in Pennsylvania, the monitoring data are sparser and newer, and they have not yet seen highly acute toxic levels. They're below the OSHA occupational level so far, but they are at levels, benzene levels in the Pennsylvania monitoring system are high enough to, in my opinion, pose a significant chronic risk of cancer and other diseases. So precautionary principle says this should not belong anywhere, but certainly not in our town. And again, I thank the board for their work.
Hi, my name is Pete Angie, and I live on Swamp College Road, and I'm a resident of Ulysses. I love it here. I came here, on and off about 10 years ago, and I am very, very concerned about the possibility of fracking coming to this area. And I want to thank the town board for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I want to voice that any benefit that comes from fracking monetarily will benefit very few people, but the damage that is associated with this kind of natural gas drilling will affect all of us. And I am very concerned that my children, speaking for Odin here, and my daughter Naomi, will grow up in an environment where there are toxins in the air to unsafe levels that are going to seriously damage their health. And I urge you to please pass this legislation for the sake of everyone in this room and for the sake of my own children. Please.
Hello, my name is Bill George. I live at 59 Cayuga Street in the village. And I want to thank everyone who's been involved with all their efforts and time and consideration and diligence. And I worked for nearly 20 years for an industry in Cortland that functioned under the Clean Air, Clean Water, and Safe Drinking Water Acts. And they did so gladly, and I think for two reasons. One, that they were all local people from management on down, and they realized that, what happened where they lived happened to them. And the other reason is because those regulations were there. And if they weren't there, there might not be quite the willingness that was there. I mean, it's just human nature. In the case of this hydrofracturing, on those two conditions, one, the people are not, by and large, local. They're outside firms who don't have that investment in our community and don't need to care. And the other thing is they don't have the regulations. They're exempted from the Clean Air and Clean Water and Safe Drinking Water Acts. And so they just don't have the incentive. There's not the big federal hammer, basically, to keep them on track. And since the local board cannot legally regulate, then I also support this amendment to just eliminate it, since there's no other regulation option. And also as an engineer, I know they don't have it under control. I mean, you can see it common sense, but there's not all the things that we had to do in industry just to monitor and keep track of their process. So thank you again for your effort.